What's up, everybody? Welcome to a Championship Monday here on GoJo and Golic. We got a banger coming your way today, and we can start it off with where we finished the weekend. The Buffalo Bills finish an epic divisional round and punch their ticket to the postseason finale. After a battle of MVPs, Saquon Barkley rolls for yet another one against the Los Angeles Rams. And don't look now, it's National Championship Monday here in Atlanta. Let's get after it. Monday morning here. Got a lot coming your way. As always, download, subscribe, rate, and review the show. Leave us a 5-star rating and check us out here live Monday through Friday, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Marshall Newhouse will join us as he always does on Mondays here in the 9 o'clock hour to go over everything we saw in the divisional round this weekend. But as of this morning right now, when I say we are here with you guys here, I am in Atlanta, Georgia, the site of the 2023-25 College Football Playoff National Championship. Dad is in a hotel in Buffalo coming off of the probably crown jewel of an NFL weekend, Dad, that had plenty for us, the divisional round living up to that moniker of the best weekend in the NFL all season long. And we will get to your game in a second, but how you feeling about the travel this morning, man? You were riding the tightrope act, trying to get out here to Atlanta to watch Notre Dame take on Ohio State tonight, coming from Buffalo after the game last night. So how are things looking on your end after a snowy game that we all watched last night?
Well, yeah, it was a snowy game, and as I was driving home from the stadium, it was snowing, and there were signs everywhere that said, caution, lake effect snow, starting like last night when I was driving home until Wednesday at 10 in the morning. I'm like, oh my God. But my thought is, this is friggin' Buffalo. They know how to handle snow, right? This should not be difficult for them to pave the streets, pave the runways, de-ice the whole thing. I'm actually a little more worried about Atlanta, which is not used to snow and cold. I talked to your mother, who's down there already. She said it's 17 degrees. I don't know if there's snow. You're going to have to tell me because I'm worried about the plane coming to get me in Buffalo is coming from Atlanta. So I'm hoping it leaves Atlanta on time to get to Buffalo because I'm supposed to land basically 4 hours before game time. So I don't need any freaking hiccups.
I will say this, Dad, as of right now, as we get ready for the championship here today, we've got no snow working. Now, in peak Atlanta fashion, I've got a severe weather warning on my phone for it being 17 degrees. My sweet summer children, I understand this isn't the way back. I will say it is cold out here, but if that's all you're dealing with, hopefully that's okay because you're right, Dad. Buffalo, that's a slow Tuesday. Lake effect snow coming through there and affecting life. And so I'm not too worried about that end.
No, I mean, I was living the cold. I was down in the field before the game. It was cold. It was in the teens. The wind wasn't that bad, but wind chill was still in the single digits. It was cold here, but that's nothing new. Well, there's a difference, not to go off topic too much, but there's a difference. So it's cold, and you know how in college and in pros, you see guys come out with like no shirt on or no sleeves on when it's really cold out.
Oh, yeah.
Well, last night, before the game, you had Buffalo and Baltimore playing, two cold weather cities, right? Not one player tried to prove his toughness because they're in the cold. They're like, we don't have to go sleeveless. It's always the warm weather team that comes to the cold city that tries to go sleeveless to say, see, it doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother me. When in actuality, it does bother you. But these two teams last night, there was a D lineman for Buffalo, came out in warmups, had a parka on and his jersey over the parka. That's how much he did not care about being bare-sleeved or bare-skinned in the cold. They just don't give a damn.
That is so true. There is a direct correlation between the cold environment you live in and your willingness, or I should say lack of desire, to go out there and have to prove yourself in those circumstances. That is generally small guys, especially in pregame, who want to go out there and pop the top. Because let's be honest, while the big guys don't wear sleeves, most of us have man boobs and aren't going to be going out there with the tarp off any more than we have to. But you're absolutely right. It is the Miamis of the world. It is the West Coast teams. It's everyone trying to show you that they're not bothered by something that is already so firmly implanted inside their heads. So thankfully here, even if it were outside, Notre Dame and Ohio State, no stranger to what's going on with the cold temperatures. But this game, as we know, will be indoors in the dome here as we get ready for the national championship. And Dad, we've got plenty to get to, and we will from your game last night. We will wrap up all the division round matchups that included a Chiefs performance that defies any and all odds, whether you believe in Tay Voodoo, just the Chiefs in the postseason in general here. They did something yesterday that we had never seen before in NFL postseason history. A brutal end of the season for Mark Andrews, Saquon Barkley continuing to rewrite the record books in Philadelphia. But, Dan, a pretty cool Monday here for Notre Dame and Ohio State in this championship game. This is always a special one for me at the end of every season. You know, having had the chance to play in this game, albeit, as we know, on the other side of the boot from Alabama in the 2013 BCS title game in here. It's amazing how much about this day and this experience I still remember going through all of that, all up until, Dad, leading through game time. I've told the story before about how in the lead up to the championship, Notre Dame went through and as a part of the process and maybe a bit of a motivational tactic, they brought a bunch of our team leaders in and showed us mock-ups of what the rings would look like to get our opinions on, if we won, what we wanted to have ready going through that. And I've never felt closer to running through a wall until the lead up to this game, where we sat pregame in our hotel getting ready to take the buses and head over to the stadium at Hard Rock at the Orange Bowl where we were playing. And we would always do something in the pregame called Mental Edge, where the coaches would put together a highlight reel of our best plays to remind us, this is what you're capable of. This is what you've done already. What you have is good enough. And this one was a little extra special before the national championship game. They showed us a video and it was all of that mental edge, but then at the end, it was as if we had won the championship game. And they cut to this image of a guy sitting at the tunnel in Notre Dame. And for anyone that hasn't been down there, above that Play Like a Champion Today sign that everyone hits is a list of every national championship Notre Dame's ever won, the year and then the score and the record, all next to each other, sitting up and down there. And we know since 1988, they have not added a score or a record to that ledger. And at the end of the video that they showed us, the guy was sitting in the tunnel next to that with a paint bucket, and he went over and he got ready and he started painting on there. And I'm getting like tears in my eyes now, because it was the most palpably real thing I had ever experienced to try and come back and give something to the place that had given so much to me. And so I remember that feeling of seeing how real it was, and in that moment recognizing what it would mean to us, what it would mean to the people that support this school. And so it's just crazy to kind of put yourself back in that headspace and realize and recognize what these guys are getting ready to go through in that regard.
Hate to be a bummer, but it just turns out hype videos don't work, do they?
No, they don't at all. God, what an ineffective strategy. We probably should have spent more time game planning.
How about it? No kidding. How quickly that hype video evaporated from your minds as 4 minutes in, we were like, oh my God, this thing is over. But I wonder, because, you know, you and your brother got to prepare for a national championship game. I never did. And when my brother Bob won it, it was in conjunction with a bowl game. It was when you were voted number one. There was no playoffs. It was 1977. They played Texas in the Cotton Bowl. They beat Texas and were voted the number one team in the country. So you don't know it's for the national championship. In that case, It's a vote. So would you rather the way you guys did it, where you had 41 or 44 days to prepare for it, or play in succession like the teams did this year, where you just had the 10 days, you prepared like a normal game, but you played 3 extra games, 3 more games of wear and tear on your body? For me, I would rather stay in the momentum of playing week to week, even though it was 3 more games.
Yeah, I do think there is something to that. And I think when you hear from these teams and you hear them talk about the preparation and how they were able to make it more like a normal game week, I do think that stuff matters in the lead up to this. You just have so much time. Like I always talk about, I threw up before every game I ever started in, except for the national championship, because we felt so prepared. We had 40 days. You had, the 15 bowl practices. We got to go home for a little while around Christmas. You go through all the workouts, you game plan your ass off. Really, kind of like people talk about with the Super Bowl, you go down to the game site with the game plan pretty much fully in when you go to the national championship in that time period. And then you're just fine tuning things and going through that final bit of preparation on site. Now for these guys, they get to have their same schedule by and large they've had. They don't have all the same festivities and song and dance. There's some of the media obligations and things that you got to go to here. But this is, Dad, I think in terms of producing the best football product, execution-wise, far superior, even though you are dealing with all of the cumulative effect now of playing more games than any national champion's going to ever have played in the history of FBS college football. So it's going to be interesting to see how those guys all respond to it. I hope that the hype videos are good and everyone gets a chance to get excited however they want here, but we'll get to the preview later on here. As we know, this game going to be decided by a lot more than that from two teams that have gone and put it on wax during the postseason run and had some really impressive wins along the way. So before we get to that, and so that I don't cry on air thinking about the ring that got lost and added to Nick Saban's hardware, Dad, why don't we talk about the NFL game that you had last night in Buffalo? The one game of the weekend that seemed to be on paper the matchup everyone was excited about, the only spread that was really anywhere close to under a touchdown. 1.5 point favorites were the Baltimore Ravens, as road favorites in this game. And Dad, a gut-wrenching 2-point loss at the end for them as the Baltimore Ravens go down there, get the score with the chance to tie it, and Mark Andrews, the all-time leading touchdown scorer in Ravens franchise history as a receiver, drops a 2-point conversion right in his lap. And unfortunately, that's curtains for the Baltimore Ravens. Dad, you were down there and got to watch it in person here. What was the feeling like in the stadium as they saw that ball bounce right off his lap?
Oh, my God. I mean, first off, it's like a collegiate atmosphere. Everybody stands for the entire game. The fans, we know about obviously the pregame celebration. It was an absolute party, but it was almost, hearts and throats when Baltimore went down and had that possible game-tying drive because the Buffalo defense in the first half shut down the Baltimore running attack of Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson. They didn't really I was a little surprised they didn't use Lamar Jackson more in the running game like they did in Pittsburgh. And it was not effective in the first half. Then it was effective in the second half. Buffalo's first couple of drives on defense, Baltimore was able to run the ball and started to look like kind of the team we were used to. And Baltimore started the game by going down and scoring, and to Rashad Bateman. And by the way, Baltimore was 9-0 this year when Rashad Bateman scored a touchdown, and he scored the first touchdown. They went right down the field on the first drive and scored a touchdown. And you were like, uh-oh. But the Buffalo defense, I'll say, Mike, came to play, and the Buffalo rushing attack. Remember, Buffalo had 210 yards rushing against Denver last week, which was good against a run. Now they play Baltimore. Baltimore's number one against the run all year, giving up about 80 yards. And Buffalo ran for 147 yards on 36 carries. They did what they did last week to Denver, not as many yards, but they were able to continue to run the ball. Cook had 67 yards, and you had Johnson 29, Davis 31, Davis 29. The other two running backs, Josh Allen had 20, but it added up. It was a cumulative effect of 36 carries. They carried the ball more times than Baltimore did. Baltimore carried it 30 times, and Derrick Henry had 199 yards. They had 271 yards did Baltimore rushing in their first meeting in week 4, and they had 176 in this one. But this was built in, you could say, by mistakes by Baltimore or causing turnovers by Buffalo, because understand, Buffalo in the regular season was plus 24 in the turnover margin. That was the best since New England in 2012. They had 32 turnovers this year. Now, the one was just a horrible overthrow by Lamar Jackson. The other one, Lamar's getting sacked by Damar Hamlin, and he's trying to whip the ball around, and Von Miller picks that up, they score on that. Mark Andrews catches a ball. Lamar breaks away in the pocket, gets a big play to Mark Andrews, who gets the ball knocked out of his hand, and they fumble and recover it. And they had 3 turnovers and 3 drop passes. 2 by Mark Andrews, including the 2-pointer. 1 in the first half up the sideline on a wheel route by Derrick Henry, who had nothing but clear space in front of him. Ball hit him in the hands, and he dropped it. So with 2 teams this good, you can't make those mistakes of dropping the ball and then turn the ball over the way Buffalo turned Baltimore over with these 2 teams that are that good. But how much is that going to haunt Mark Andrews? Second 2-point play, it was 21-19 when Baltimore scored. They tried a 2-point play, which I did not like at all. It was Lamar just in the pocket. They gave him no option to run. I hated the call. They didn't get it. And then this one, to tie it up at 27, they roll him right. I thought, okay, that's the call. Give him the option to run if it's open, the option to throw if somebody's open. And let's be honest, Mark Andrews was the inside man on trips. He just did the little out route. He was wide open. Ball hit him in the hands. He just fumbled it around as he was falling and dropped it. The play was there. Now, there was 1:33 left in the game, so we can't sit there and say it would have gone to overtime had they made it. Buffalo would have had the ball with $1:33 to go to try and go down and win it. But still, Baltimore would have been at least back in it.
Lamar Jackson after the game here talking about the turnovers and mistakes that plagued this team.
I feel for us came up short. And like I've been saying all season, every time we're in situations like this, turnovers play a factor. Penalties play a factor. Tonight, with the turnovers, we can't have that, and that's why we lost the game. Because as you can see, we're moving the ball wonderfully. It's hold on to the ball. I'm sorry for my language, annoying.
You can see the frustration mounting, Dad, for Lamar Jackson, who still hasn't won consecutive postseason games in his career. Last night, 254 yards, 2 touchdowns. But as you mentioned, bad interception, the turnover for Von Miller. He was a part of this. And this team, now we talked about it's appropriate to expect another level of accomplishment for a guy that's going to be a 3-time MVP, and they're going to get sent home entirely because of, certainly you could say the mistakes they made, but I do want to give credit. You're right, Dad. This Buffalo defense was healthier than when they faced during the season and had gone in and had turnovers built into the model all year long. And so they deserve an overwhelming amount of credit for that. And while Josh Allen moves on here in this battle of MVP candidates here, cool moment with them at the end, for Lamar Jackson and this Ravens team, certainly missing Zay Flowers is going to be a what if, all these different factors, but they had what they need and the opportunities in this game, and Buffalo just made the plays and forced Baltimore into some uncharacteristic mistakes that tanked their season.
Yeah, and you talk about that Week 4 matchup when Baltimore ran all over them. Buffalo didn't have linebacker Matt Milano, linebacker Terrell Bernard, nickelback Taron Johnson. All 3 of them were out. All 3 played last night. Bernard was the one who stripped Mark Andrews of the ball on the one play. He stripped it and recovered it. Those guys played integral parts. And Zay Flowers played in the first game, but just had 1 catch in Week 4, so it's not like he was dominant in that game. Congrats to the Bills. Lamar's probably going to win his 3rd MVP, but Josh Allen moves on to the AFC Championship, and I think he'll take that over an MVP, but enjoying that on the beach somewhere.
He'll take that, but Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills now have to go out here and slay their final postseason dragon. The team that has been the bane of their existence since Josh Allen took over at quarterback is now the final boss that lays ahead of them in the AFC Championship. So coming up next, we will give you the most quintessential Kansas City Chiefs stat, a first time for everything, and a first time that we got in the divisional round courtesy of Mahomes and Bunch. Next.
in Kansas City, from the organization to the community, from the team, and from my family. And I just try to cherish that. I mean, I still remember moments from the World Series my dad played when I was 5 years old. So these are moments that I'll have with my family for the rest of my life. And it's a growing family. Hopefully we're done growing for a little while. But it's cool that I'm able to play in these big games.
Family hopefully done growing for a little while here as Mahomes welcomes yet another healthy child into the world ahead of this postseason run. And the Kansas City Chiefs do what they do best, Dad. Win in the division round. We mentioned going into this, no quarterback in any round of postseason history had a better record without a loss, and Patrick Mahomes 6-0 in the divisional round, and now make that 7 this weekend. In a stat that's going to probably drive Chiefs haters wild, as so many people, I think now more than ever, have found themselves publicly talking about being sick of this Kansas City Chiefs team, not being sure how they're managing to win all these games despite looking far less than the team we've seen in the past. This should sum it up perfectly for everyone. The Chiefs yesterday against the Houston Texans, or I should say this weekend, were outgained by 124 yards in that game, and the Houston Texans did not turn the football over in a game they ultimately lost. Before yesterday, teams that outgained their opponent by 100-plus yards without turning the ball over in the Super Bowl era and the postseason were 46-0. The Houston Texans, the first team ever to lose in such circumstances. And so, Dad, whether you call it Tay Voodoo or Mahomes magic or whatever you want, this Kansas City Chiefs team continues to find a way. What'd you see out of this group, and how did they actually pull this off?
Listen, they pull it off how they've been pulling it off. I mean, this was a one-score game at halftime, a one-score game until about 4.5 minutes to go in the game then. When Kansas City kicked the field goal, went up 23-12. Then they had a safety later on. But they win it the way they've been winning all year. I mean, remember Pat Mahomes complained last year after they won the Super Bowl that he wasn't happy with the offensive performance. And it was the defense that was leading the way. And listen, quite honestly, the defense again, 8 sacks? 8 sacks of C.J. Stroud. I mean, 9 tackles for losses, 14 quarterback hits. I mean, this defense, we talk about Pat Mahomes and offense and them finding a way, but this defense is playing some ball. And again, what a great matchup. We'll have time to talk about, obviously, them in Buffalo. But you just know to never count out Kansas City, right? I mean, you never count them out. In fact, every winner this weekend of the 4 winning teams, every single one of them were outgained. But none of the winning teams turned the ball over. So it just shows you how important turnovers are in all games, especially in big games.
And I think that was what's most surprising about this one is you can understand looking at Baltimore and Buffalo, hey, yeah, if the Ravens turn the ball over 3 times against the Buffalo team, probably going to have a bad time and certainly going to lead to lesser stats. Houston didn't have that here, and that's the inexplicable part, I think, on their side where, Dad, you talk about Houston's defense going into this game here and what they were able to do here. Danielle Hunter, Will Anderson Jr., a phenomenal game against an offense for Kansas City that I know we spent a lot of time talking about this last week. Started Joe Thuney at left tackle. We made all that discussion about DJ Humphries. Would he be back there or Joe Thuney at left tackle? They go with Joe Thuney out there. They continue to have him. And listen, there were some struggles there. Certainly you saw Will Anderson Jr. and those guys be able to use their athleticism on the perimeter. But how about Dad dusting off the rust and into the postseason where he is most comfortable? Taylor Swift and Caitlin Clark looking on in the crowd in the box as Travis Kelce has another one of those vintage postseason performances for him. 7 catches, 117 yards and a touchdown. Dad, all of a sudden he's breaking tackles. He's getting yards after the catch in this game. Now, I think this is the question, Dad, and I'll be curious. They're coming off the bye. As we know, Kansas City in the Arrowhead Invitational gets that extra week to recover. Didn't have to play in week 18 either. And so Travis has had plenty of rest here. Coming off of this performance, now that they're going to be games 1 week after the other until the Super Bowl will have that Pro Bowl break, do you expect Travis to be able to keep this up now that they'll be back to having to play with a week off in between this as opposed to the multi-week break that he just had?
No, I think because as far as Travis is concerned, they have 2 more games where we talked about early in the season when he was not getting a lot of catches, certainly not getting a lot of yards after the catch or reception yards. There was a whole season in front of him. We were all like, man, if he's not doing anything now, what's it going to be like toward the end of the season, but he started picking it up toward the end of the season, and he knows the most he can play is 2 more games. So, mentally, to be there, mentally to help you be there physically, understanding you have 1 more game and then you have 2 weeks before potentially the Super Bowl should you win this game. So I don't see any drop off in his play if he, in fact, is used as much for 7 catches for 117 yards. I mean, he was listen, Mahomes and Travis have a great relationship, but Mahomes also takes what the defense gives him as well. And a lot of times, it's not Travis, and a lot of times it is Travis. So this one was Travis. Travis was finding open spots, getting yards after the catch. So, no, I don't see a drop-off physically for him.
Yeah, it will be interesting if he can maintain that going forward, because you're right. For the longest time, the formula for having a chance against the Kansas City Chiefs offense, even when Tyreek Hill was there, was, hey, you got to jam up 87 first, because if you don't get Travis Kelce offline, then Mahomes is going to be able to work through that lifeline, and you're going to have a really bad time. And so I think that's certainly going to be important. But, Dad, you saw some of the other guys here. Xavier Worthy made a couple of big plays in this game. Hollywood Brown, the almost catch down the sideline, I think is one of those things that going forward, you're going to need more of from him as other teams are able to cue in on that. As you look at the Buffalo Bills and that linebacker group that's going to be going up against Travis Kelce, you're going to need some production from some of those guys that you've brought in over the course of this season to try and kick off there. On the other side for the Texans, Dad, we talk about and kind of put a bow on this season for them, defined by defense and an offense that took a massive step back. And certainly you can point to the injury at wide receiver that snake bit them this season. You bring Stephon Diggs over and you lose him. Nico Collins out for a bunch of this season. Tank Dell, another really gruesome injury. And you feel for that guy there. But we mentioned going into this one, 8 sacks in this game for a team that gave up the most quick pressures in the NFL and was going to have an uphill battle. And you saw it there. We talked about Chris Jones, one of 2 players in the NFL this season with 20-plus pressures on the interior and the exterior, go out there and gets the sack going up against Blake Fisher at right tackle early on. That group exploited what I think is going to be the chief and number 1 fix for Houston this offseason, Dad, is they've got to reset that foundation in front of C.J. Stroud again, because ultimately that's what's undone this offense the entire season, and it's what undid them in this game.
Yeah. Obviously, the injuries, as you mentioned, to the wide receivers hurts when you knock off 2 big targets like they did with Tank Dell and Stephon Diggs. But yes, protection is going to be key without question going forward. They certainly finished the season better than they played the season in a mediocre division. We didn't give them much hope, and there they ended up beating the Chargers and moved on. We were all a little surprised at that. The Chargers were actually a road favorite in that game. So the future, I think, still bright for them. Injuries, get those guys back. C.J. Stroud is definitely a good quarterback. But listen, for Kansas City, moving on, I mean, the one thing that and we talked about no turnovers, that's been Buffalo's calling card. Buffalo has turned over teams. So can they turn over Kansas City? That was really a big difference in the game against Baltimore. And and a lot of times you can't rely on turnovers, but sometimes in a year where the turnovers are coming, they keep coming. You can't expect it year to year. Like they had 32 turnovers at the end of the regular season. I wouldn't expect that again next year or the year after. It doesn't happen like a yearly thing, that many, to be plus 24 in the turnover margin. But it's happening this year. So you ride that as long as you can.
You mentioned, winning in the turnover margin, usually a way that can help explain these differences in yardage totals this weekend. Every winner outgained. In this one, it was special teams for the Kansas City Chiefs. Kaimi Fairmare misses the 55-yard field goal attempt. Misses a PAT try, has another field goal attempt blocked late in this game. And so all of those things start to add up as this Chiefs team, Dad, has been great winning in the margins. And obviously we talked about the Mahomes and Kelce timeline there. Patrick Mahomes also becomes one of the most efficient scramblers in NFL history every time he takes the field in the postseason. And they just don't make mistakes, Dad. And that's going to be the big thing is Buffalo was able to get over on Baltimore because they were able to force them into mistakes here. Those are just not mistakes that Patrick Mahomes and this Kansas City Chiefs team make. And you look at, and has been pointed out, they weren't trying to win in week 18. And the other 17 games that they went out there and tried to win, there were 16 wins involved in there, because they get to these critical situations, even in regular season, and say, we're not going to blink. And now in the postseason, that doubles down. And so this is going to be so much more mental than it is physical, because you look physically at this game. Buffalo should win this game, period, point blank, end of sentence. But if you look at the mental portion of this, that no doubt is a factor in sports, Buffalo's got a massive uphill battle to climb.
Yeah, they absolutely do, because it's just in your head. If things start to go wrong, you're like, oh, the here we go again situation. But I agree. Buffalo, I think on paper is the better team. You also look at Buffalo getting turnovers, and also look at the field goals Kansas City kicked. Butker kicked a 32-yarder, a 36-yarder, and a 27-yarder. What does that mean? Where the ball spotted, where the ball snapped. Those 3 times they were in the red zone. And they've had trouble in the red zone putting the ball in the end zone. And, you know, when you get to in the playoffs, we all know it. Well, it doesn't matter, regular season or playoff, touchdowns are worth more than field goals, but they get stopped in the red zone. They have trouble putting the ball in the end zone, in the red zone, and Buffalo doesn't. Buffalo was money this year in the red zone, putting the ball in the end zone.
Yeah, and you look at the lines kind of reflect what you're talking about, Dad, in the lead up to these 2 championship games here. The Philadelphia Eagles, we'll talk about them, open as 5.5-point favorites against the Washington Commanders. But right now on DraftKings Sportsbook, the Kansas City Chiefs hosting a home playoff game at Arrowhead in the AFC Championship, which has been their birthright since Patrick Mahomes came here, sans last year. 1.5-point favorite. So not even getting the 3-point favorite that we normally see against a team whose number they've had, which indicates what everyone believes in this game, Dad. Buffalo's the better football team overall. They have made football remarkably simple all year long, but it's really hard to pick against Kansas City in the postseason. And we're a week out from having to make this decision, Dad. And I'm already going to tell you, I'm going to have a really hard time saying no to Patrick Mahomes in this bunch, given the benefit of the history they've put on display in this postseason and the fact that they just don't blink.
Yeah, they don't. And a quick number to the Buffalo red zone, just to put a number to it. They were second in the league. Over 71% of the time in the red zone, they scored touchdowns. So they weren't kicking field goals. They were scoring touchdowns. And another great matchup in this game is the Chiefs. They had, as I said, 8 sacks against Houston, Chris Jones and that crew getting to the quarterback. Well, Buffalo allowed only 14 sacks for the year. They were number 1. As a matter of fact, they were the first team to have under 15 sacks and under 10 giveaways for a season. I mean, they were clean on offense. And they're clean in protecting Josh Allen. So that's another big area to look for.
Yeah, it's exciting to think about already, because you're right. This seems like the most mature Buffalo team. And quite honestly, as we look out in the playoff field and coming up next, get to look at the NFC portion of what happened over this weekend. Them and Buffalo, I should say, and the Philadelphia Eagles have gone about football in a remarkably similar way. The difference is the Buffalo Bills have Josh Allen playing MVP caliber quarterback this season. And so with that at the center of what they've built up here, an offense that has coached the recklessness out of Josh Allen and has now gotten to the point where he is improving the lives of his teammates in every phase of this game. We've watched what Khalil Shakir's become this season for them. Amari Cooper obviously brought over to help Dalton Kincaid in this tight end room. To go along with James Cook in the backfield, that's been a big part of this extended passing game as well. But it all moves because of Josh. And for all of Josh's postseason success, we know, Dad, this has been the one team that's been the, LeBron James to their Eastern Conference for years, sitting there and being the lid on their hopes and dreams, and they got a chance to go and get it done.
I tell you, one of the biggest improvements for Josh Allen, what do we always talk about with him? He was great, but he turned the ball over. He's not turning the ball over. Just 6 interceptions on the year. Clean game yesterday. He's not as errant with the ball, trying to make plays. He is playing more under control while playing at an MVP level. So I think the theme in these first couple of segments we had is turnovers are huge. And that's not rocket science. That's not anything new, but it certainly had an effect on the games.
It certainly had an effect on the games that we saw this weekend, maybe nowhere more so than the Motor City. Coming up next, we'll look at the Lions' demise and ask the question, is Jaden Daniels already the best rookie quarterback we've ever seen? about the divisional round here. A lot of people going to be asking questions about Lamar Jackson and the mounting postseason record that's going to follow him around. Despite all the MVPs, it's going to be used as a slight against him. We can say till we're blue in the face, quarterback wins aren't a stat. That's not how we should measure these guys here. But after another season that falls short of expectations, where offensively they've looked like one of the best teams in the NFL, that's going to follow him around. Josh Allen really going to have his day in court coming up here in the AFC Championship game as well. But a new conversation, I think, is going to begin after what we saw the Washington Commanders do to the Detroit Lions. They author a 45-31 win, where the story in large part, Dad, will be the turnovers that we saw from the Detroit Lions offense. Jared Goff and company sputtering, but this Lions defense looked like it was food all day long against Jaden Daniels and this Washington Commanders offense in a way that I think is going to be having a lot of people asking the question, Dad, does Jaden Daniels already have a claim to being one of the best, if not the best, rookie quarterback performance that we've ever seen?
I mean, you have to put him up there, right? For what he has done. It has been absolutely amazing. And the thing about it is, I mean, is usually in a rookie quarterback, you see turnovers. He had 9 interceptions. I mean, he had under double-digit interceptions to go along with 25 touchdowns. I mean, that usually it's a learning process for a quarterback. Now, he can run himself out of problems instead of having to throw himself out of problems at times, but still, he's not making mistakes. And the dude always looks cool as a cucumber. And that was something I noticed from him in preseason on. Forgetting the stats was his poise. Nothing affected him. It was like C.J. Stroud last year, his rookie year in Houston, where nothing seemed to affect him. Seemed like a normal heartbeat at all times. And I saw that out of Jaden Daniels. He just has perfect control of that offense. And when Detroit gives it away 5 times, that certainly doesn't help.
Yeah. No, it certainly doesn't help, but Jaden Daniels continues, we talked about it, to be one of the best quarterbacks we've seen as a rookie against the blitz. And this game was no different. You knew the Lions were going to have to throw the kitchen sink at him again. And in this game on blitz, he was blitzed on 54% of his dropbacks, completed 12 of 16 passes for 191 yards and a touchdown. He was pressured on 60% of those dropbacks, and it didn't matter. His completion percentage over expectation, 7 percentage points over what was expected there. So he was sensational in this game. And for a little context of where he stacks up historically, shout out to Ben Solak over at ESPN. In terms of expected points added per dropback, Jaden Daniels is having the 5th best rookie quarterback season ever. In terms of success rate, it's 3rd. And you look now, he is one of, I believe, 4 quarterbacks in NFL history to win multiple playoff games his rookie season. He joins Joe Flacco, Mark Sanchez, and most recently Brock Purdy in that distinction, Dad. And so it's been an impressive run. He is so poised in pressure situations, and that's going to have to continue against Philadelphia on the other side. But let's talk about the Detroit Lions for a second here. A brutal way for this season to end. They finally get the 1 seed. Here was Dan Campbell after the game reflecting on the Lions losing at home field as the 1 seed.
It just hurts to lose, man. And I don't care if you're the 7 seed, 6 seed, 5 seed, 1 seed, because I've lost at all of them damn near, and it stings and it hurts.
And hurts, Dad, the operative term, as we know. The Detroit Lions, so much of their season is just being able to overcome injury. And it seemed like the dam finally broke, Dad, in a game where they couldn't force turnovers. And the offense that had been the steady, consistent portion of the operation all of a sudden started to give away. And we know not all of the turnovers were Jared Goff's fault necessarily. A bad sack by the offensive line you don't usually see given up, but Jared airmailing another throw that ends up going for the pick 6 in that game. So many of the turnovers leading to points here that in a game that you knew was going to be a shootout here, you couldn't afford to give the other team that many bites at the apple. And so, unfortunately, this is one where the defense is going to be the easy punching bag, Dad, but this is finally a game where the offense didn't hold serve in the way they had all year long.
Which is amazing because they had 201 yards rushing and 320 yards passing. So it's another one where the losing team outgained the winning team. So they were getting yards. And listen, they end up scoring 31 points. It was a shootout that we knew could come from Detroit's side. Washington had been hit and miss. We knew they could score points in bunches, but you always wondered with a rookie quarterback, would he come down to earth? And he didn't. I mean, they are a scoring machine. You worry more about the defensive side of the ball for Washington, but the offense, man, they can put points on the board. And Detroit had a 5-turnover game earlier in the season and won. So I'm sure they were like, okay, we're turning the ball over. That's not good, but we've won with 5 turnovers before. This time they just couldn't hold off Washington. As they would try and make a comeback, Washington would score and push the lead back up again.
And this game feels bigger than just a loss here. And it already would have been bad. Like this Washington team, I think a lot of people thought after the Bucs win, hey, good story, but now you're about to run into a team that I said was further along in their team building, had a great sense of identity, would be able to overcome the injury. And at some point, enough is just too much. And I think that was certainly a part of this defensively, where you couldn't go out there and really muster anything in terms of stops. But Dad, now you look forward towards the future. Ben Johnson, everyone expects to get a head coaching job this offseason. Aaron Glenn expected to be probably behind Ben Johnson, one of the hottest coordinator names in this offseason cycle. And so you're talking about a Detroit team that lost in this way, dealt with all that injury, and now may finally lose the coordinators that have been part of the bedrock of this current run. We talk about it with quarterbacks all the time. A team like San Francisco getting ready to have their lives changed because Brock Purdy gets paid. Dad, for Detroit, would you say they missed their last best chance of trying to get a Super Bowl in this window?
Well, I mean, listen, their offense should be back. The defense should be healed up. A lot will depend. This is like a few years ago when Philadelphia lost Shane Steichen and Jonathan Gannon in the same year, the offensive and defensive coordinator, to the Colts and to the Cardinals. And it looks like Detroit's going to lose theirs. A lot depends on who they replace him with. Hank Fraley, the O-line coach, is looking to be an O-coordinator. Do you hire from within, keep the same system going? Obviously, it's just a difference of how you call plays, but keep the same system going. Then would you hire from within on the defensive coordinator side as well? I don't think their window's closed. I think they have too much talent. Injuries got them, but listen, nobody's going to care. Nobody's going to cry over that. Nobody's going to say, oh, but they had injuries. It's tough. It's the way it goes. And Dan Campbell will be the first one to tell you that. Nobody cares that you were hurt. You have a team on the field. You're expected to go out there and win. They didn't do it. They have to live with that in the offseason.
Quite honestly, the team we're getting ready to talk about next in Philadelphia may be the best example of what's coming for them, because Philly was in the Super Bowl in 2022, and then all of a sudden a couple of coordinator hires later that didn't work out for them had them sunk to a place where people were talking about Nick Sirianni's job. I'm with you. I trust the talent on this roster, especially when healthy, to go out and still get it done. But that's a lot of change to weather. And for all the love we show Dan Campbell, what they do, what him and Brad Holmes and everyone there does in terms of these next two coordinator hires are going to go a long way in informing what the next iteration of this teams look like. I think they'll still be contenders, but now, especially in a competitive NFC North, that's a big potential step back that could allow teams like Green Bay and Minnesota to come in and capitalize. Let's hear from the Philadelphia Eagles portion of things as well here. Big time win for them as they beat the Rams 28-22. Here was their head coach, Nick Sirianni, after the game talking about the win.
But like I said to the team, that just makes you more hungry to continue on. That's a great football team. We found a way in the midst of adversity. We embraced the adversity. We played championship defense, and it takes everybody and every single buddy in that room, and we're excited to move on.
It took everybody on that team, there's no doubt, but also took an extra special somebody here, and that is going to go to our Campbell's Chunky Play of the Week and Player of the Week. Campbell's Chunky is presented by Campbell's Chunky, the soup that eats like a meal. And that would be Saquon Barkley, Dad. The game he had his 5th touchdown run of 50-plus yards this season and became the first player with 3 touchdowns run of 60-plus against one team since Jamal Lewis did it against the Browns in 2003. 2 more he adds in this game. An Eagles single-game playoff record, 205 rushing yards. After, remember, against the Rams in the regular season, setting the Eagles single-season rushing total with 255 yards in that game, Dad. So he was the Ram killer. And in a snowy game where I heard he called LaShawn McCoy and some guys to talk about the keys to having successful games in the snow for the Birds, he went out there and continues to add to his already stellar Eagles legacy just in year 1.
I mean, to think what he did in the two games. They played November 24th against the Rams and beat them. You mentioned that Saquon had 26 carries for 255 yards. In the two games against the Rams, Saquon Barkley had 52 carries for 460 rushing yards and 4 touchdowns. And on top of that, he had, in both games combined, 8 receptions for 74 yards. So he had a total of 534 yards total offense for Saquon Barkley in the two games against the Rams. It was absolutely unbelievable. And all that said, after that second run of 78 yards, the Rams put together a 10-play, 70-something yard drive, 10 plays, 70 yards in a minute 48 to make it a 6-point game, to actually make it a one-score game with the possibility of pulling it out in the snow globe that was Philadelphia. But Philly held them off and will now play a Washington team that split with Philly. The last game, December 22nd, Washington won 36-33 in a wild one. Washington will not have any qualms about coming to Philly and trying to beat the Eagles. None at all.
No, I would say for all we talked about the juice on the matchup in the other side in the AFC with Bills, Chiefs, and all the history there, we get an NFC East clash in the NFC Championship game with the team that represented the conference in the Super Bowl 2 years ago. And what we just talked about in Jaden Daniels is authoring one of the best rookie quarterback seasons of all time. And Dad, we're going to talk a lot about Saquon Barkley, and understandably so. There's a reason he is our Campbell's Chunky Player of the Week. But you also got to give some love. We mentioned the last time the Rams and the Eagles squared off, Jalen Carter, only one pressure in that entire game here. 2 sacks in this one, including a big one down the stretch that ultimately helped them hold things off. He played like a man possessed in this game. And this Philadelphia Eagles defense, Dad, has been sensational all year long, being able to turn these great athletes, most of them former Georgia Bulldogs, over and loose. And without Nakobe Dean at linebacker, they were still able to go out there and get it done. Really impressive performance, especially from 98 and Green.
Yeah, and forcing 2 fumbles. Kyron Williams with another fumble. Matthew Stafford had a couple and lost one. I mean, it's just a shame, obviously, with the fumbles, but that's, again, can lead to just death, especially in the playoffs. And Philly played a clean game. They had a couple of fumbles, but they didn't lose any fumbles at all. And Jalen, while he didn't throw any touchdowns, didn't throw any interceptions either, as they ran the ball for 285 yards. Just amazing. I mean, what a difference Saquon Barkley. You know, Derrick Henry, we talked about the difference he made in Baltimore. They were the top rushing team, and the Eagles were number 2. But what Saquon Barkley has meant to this team has been incredible.
Well, especially the second half of this game, we talk all the time about, things that travel and all those old cliches, but both these games here, incredibly cold weather, both had snow on the field. This Philadelphia game certainly had more of it, especially falling in the second half. And so being able to simplify the formula, hand it off behind your meat shield and give it to one of the most talented running backs we've ever seen is a pretty steady formula to once again insulate your passing game. There may still come a day. Now, this game is going to be played in Philadelphia, so there's a chance we could be dealing with similar elements yet again that makes their brand of football particularly effective in the postseason against the team on the other side in Washington that we know is going to want to air it out a little bit more. Certainly gets a lot out of their ground game, but Philadelphia and Buffalo, 2 teams that could not be built better for the elements and for these kind of late runs through the postseason here. And you saw exactly why in this game, an incredibly physical output for this team that is now, as we mentioned, I believe a 5.5 point favorite over the Commanders going into the next round.
So right now, the early forecast says 41 and partly sunny in Philadelphia on Sunday. And for Kansas City, it's cloudy and a high of 33. At this point, no snow in either forecast.
All right, something to keep an eye on there, as we've seen, no doubt, the weather, football weather for a lot A different kind of year for the UConn Huskies on the men's side, who have been so dominant in recent seasons. Jemiah Neal pours in a career-high 24 points as the Creighton Blue Jays beat UConn 68-63 at UConn. It snaps a 28-game home winning streak for the Huskies as Ryan Kalkbrenner pours in 16 in the loss. They hadn't lost at home since January 25th of 2020. You're with you guys. I'm down in Atlanta ahead of the college football playoff national championship today. Notre Dame, Ohio State, getting ready to go. Dad over here processing some mild flight delays, starting to get a little nervous over there, big guy.
Yeah, I get a little nervous. I'm already 50 minutes delayed. That's 5-0, 50 minutes delayed. Going to land closer and closer to game time. Usually it's the start of a delay. God knows when the delay, if it'll keep going. So, yeah, I'm going to be doing the last hour of this show with my eye on the Delta app to see if it's delayed even more and say a short little prayer.
Dad going to show up at halftime, and the Mud Dog, they're going to win the Boyben Bowl, and it's going to be a great story that we all get to tell at some point. Now, to help us tell the story of the NFL weekend and maybe look a little peek at the game coming up tonight here, Marshall Newhouse, Super Bowl 11-year NFL veteran and one of the hosts of the pregame Power Up here on the Draft Network. You'll actually be able to check out in Marshall along with Trey and everyone else coming up tonight. Breaking down the college football playoff national championship. So, Marshall, good morning. How are you feeling? Take me back. You are a proud TCU alum. You guys played in this championship game a couple of years ago here. I know you and I think, wired a little more similarly in terms of pregame nerves than my dad, who does not a care in the world.
Yeah, it's the worst kind of sickness to actually care. And I can remember caring a lot. Obviously, the week before, having beat Michigan in such an amazing way. And I was previewing the game. I was doing some analysis, and I understood that we were up. It was the David and Goliath thing. But even before the game, there's just no way to not. Once you care, there's no way to not get wrapped up in it. And so you're sitting there holding your breath. You're tensing your midsection, whatever abs you and I have underneath these layers of rolls, or everything's tensed up. I couldn't eat. People kept coming up to me and asking me, and I was trying to fake a smile. I was like, it's just the worst kind of way to be for what is a game, but you just care so much.
Yeah, listen, I am naturally wired different than that. I don't have as much into it emotionally, but also I have a comparison. Now, I can't say that, Mike, when you and Jake were playing in the national championship game. Me and your mother were in the stands just sweating it out, at least for the first 4 minutes till that game was over. But you know what I mean? I mean, we were so emotionally involved and emotionally, quite honestly, spent from the season that we went to all the games, and then waiting 40-some days for this game. We were obviously emotionally involved. There's no way I could equal that, right? Unless I'm old enough for my grandkid to be playing in a championship game. I mean, I had kids playing in the national championship game. I am certainly not going to be as wired for this game, where I have no relations playing in the game, than I was when I had 2 kids playing in the game.
This is a fair point here. And so going into today, while I will be a ball of stress bouncing around here in Atlanta, if I see our mutual friend Ryan Clark or any of the other Notre Dame or Ohio State parents, I will say a silent prayer for them, because they are getting ready to fight God's hardest battle coming up watching this game today. Let's talk about the games we watched this weekend, Marshall. Tons of good stuff from the NFL here. You know, Saquon Barkley, Jaden Daniels, Josh Allen, Pat Mahomes. As you look out over the divisional round that was, what was the performance that stood out most to you that left a mark for the winning team this weekend?
I think it was Saquon, because listen, we understood that Jalen Hurts was going to have to just not make mistakes. But the fact that you have a running back who you now can say ran for 200 yards in a playoff game, and moving forward, regardless of Jalen Hurts' health, he looks to be okay. He finished the game. That's just such an incredible weapon. We thought that would appear in a Derrick Henry fashion for the Ravens, but it's just not that simple. But this offensive line and Saquon, he's kind of been hiding in New York, if you want to talk about that, for a playoff guy. His talent, his skill, his breakaway speed. I mean, it's just such an incredible fit. So I think Saquon for sure. And then it's also a story of defenses. I just went through the reanalysis just to verify. All 4 teams in these games that had the most total yards all lost. And 3 of 4 of those 4 teams lost the turnover battle. And it was just the teams that turned you over and the teams that held on to the ball, protected it. It's just a story as old as time in playoff football.
Yeah, I mean, those were obviously the positives, especially Saquon. What about the negative side? The biggest a favorite that lost in Detroit, 5 turnovers in this game, and just couldn't overcome it and lose to a Washington team who was just playing some great ball. But what's the epitaph for Detroit?
Yeah, it's just such a tough loss. And you rarely say for an NFL team that a lot of the country was rooting for you, but it felt like a lot of people were rooting for the Lions. It was an incredible story. And yeah, those 5 turnovers, there's just no way to win doing that. And Jared Goff, I don't think all the blame is on his shoulders, but he just didn't play a great game. And he kind of reverted in the same similar way that Sam Darnold reverted back to his worst tendencies. They're not on the same tier, obviously. Jared Goff has had a much better season in time in Detroit, but those things just are backbreakers. There's no way to reach the ultimate heights playing like that. And then on the opposite side, you have a rookie quarterback who's doing everything he's supposed to do and doing it well. And so it's just a rough end of their season. They have some critical guys who might be hitting free agency. I think the core is still there, but they're going to lose probably both of their coordinators. And so, this from year to year, teams don't look the same. It's hard to recreate magic from year to year. So the Lions, I think most people believe their culture, the foundation they built with Dan Campbell is there to stay. But things they're going to have to figure out, what is it now like to get poached? What is it now like to have been the top dog, not win a Super Bowl, and retool to stay competitive year after year?
Yeah, I think that's certainly something we've seen, teams like Buffalo do this season, teams like Kansas City do historically, figure out how to navigate that change when, to your point, other teams come calling for the guys and the coaches that have done so well for your squads here. Another team that fell short, Marshall, the Baltimore Ravens, Lamar Jackson probably on his way to his third MVP, all before 3 years old. How much of yesterday do you put on Lamar Jackson? And is there something to this growing narrative around him in the postseason?
Yeah, you have to put a healthy amount on him, but not all of it. Obviously, he spoke about it right after in the press conference that he's just got to find this focus where when that bad snap happens, he's not immediately trying to take that bad snap and then turn it into a extra positive. The positive play is just to go down, get back to the line of scrimmage, live to fight another day. And so you can tell his body immediately goes into fight mode and trying to make a big play. And so I think he's got to squeeze that out of himself because getting in that hole is the name of the game. Obviously, the Mark Andrews stuff plays into that. You feel for him. He's been such a reliable target. You put him in that situation 10 times, he figures it out. He doesn't fumble the ball. He catches that 2-point conversion 9 other times. And so it's again, Lamar Jackson going through this evolution and taking these lumps. And so I think the previous losses, you could very much say that the moments kind of overwhelmed him. This was just like, I think a couple times he just was trying to do too much. Because the 2 turnovers in the first half don't happen, they win the game, I truly believe. And it's just that simple. They were primed and ready to go. I think they were the better team. Those turnovers, you can't overcome that in the playoffs.
You talk about a team changing from year to year like Detroit with the possibility of the coordinators. How about with Baltimore? What can you expect from a 31-year-old Derrick Henry, who, again, is the only back to go over 1,900 yards in 2 seasons? He had an incredible year, kind of broke the barrier for 30-year-olds, but now going to be 31.
Yeah, another year, year of mileage on those tires. Listen, I talk a lot on social media about us rethinking and retooling this conversation around running back specifically. We swung the pendulum, saying that everything's analytical after 26, 27. They fall off a cliff. You shouldn't pay any of them. To now saying we see Saquon have a year, Josh Jacobs have a year, Derrick Henry have a year. To let's realize there are outliers in every category. He's an outlier. And until he shows me otherwise, he's a guy that I think if you just set him up the right way, he's they make a big deal. He spends $250,000 on his body. I spend a quarter on a Happy Meal. We're not the same. He does things that are extraordinary on top of an already extraordinary body. Yes, he's 31, but in the right system, aka Baltimore, that know how to use him. They understand he kind of gains momentum as the game and the season goes on. He can absolutely continue to be a weapon. Especially if the money's right, and they got him on a steal. If the money is right and the value is there, it makes perfect sense.
To your point, and just about things adding up over time, this was the most carries that Derrick Henry had in a season since 2020. He had 378 carries. Since 2022. He had 349 in 2022, 325 this year. His highest yards per carry average in his entire career, just under 6 yards per carry in a season that, no doubt, it was exemplary, the combination of him and Lamar Jackson in that backfield. Going to be something that Baltimore can continue to build around. We'll see. Todd Monken, their offensive coordinator, a guy who got some head coaching interviews, and no doubt should be interesting to a lot of teams here. Marshall, let's look ahead, early look at next weekend. The Buffalo Bills and Josh Allen, kind of in that game against Baltimore, really interesting foil. Lamar Jackson having to try and figure out how to get some of that maverick out of his game. That seems to be something that Josh Allen has largely done. A turnover-free outing for them while turning the Ravens over. And overall, him being able to corral that in his game seems to be part of the formula for how they're here. How do they finally get over this Kansas City-sized hump that's been in front of them his entire postseason tenure?
Yeah, absolutely. It is an evolution. I mean, I think people will allude to it, and we saw in real time that play near the goal line where it's a QB run. He sees a receiver out of the corner of his eye, and we're like, is he about to lateral this? No, 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 no. And he holds on to the ball, and he goes down, and they kick the field goal. But that's a Josh Allen we saw in his rookie year try to lateral the ball 10 yards away from him. So it's an evolution, it's a maturation. And yeah, the Kansas City Chiefs are not going to beat themselves. And I said this the other day, they're going to drag you into their style. They've turned to this team that is just, we are the top dog. You react to us. And that's why they try to get the home field advantage so much. That's why they want the bye. And that's why ultimately Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes are in cruise control all season for the playoffs. This is the moment that they've waited for, and they're saving up their energy, their scheming. He and Travis's, down to down kind of improvisation. This is the moment they do all that, and now they have a defense now 2 years running to back that up. And so Josh Allen's going to have a Herculean effort, but again, it comes from taking care of the ball and taking shots when they're there and not forcing it.
One thing going forward to finish this up. Now, I don't think that the penalties cost Houston the game, though the roughing the pass around Will Anderson did give Kansas City a first down. They went for and got a touchdown, I believe. They have to change this, right, guys? I mean, if nothing else, let the roughing the passer go to review, because those were two of the worst calls I have ever seen. The roughing the passer call on Will Anderson, and then when Patrick Mahomes is dancing around and then sits down and they call him for roughing the quarterback. That has to get out of football, Marshall, doesn't it? It's ridiculous.
Yeah, the refs did not have a great weekend for such, high stakes matchups. And those penalties, and we talked about earlier this season on the boundary, on the sideline, when a guy like Pat Mahomes is toying with defenders, man, that's not okay. Like the whole, the rules have changed to keep quarterbacks healthy so we get these stars in these moments. Okay, fine. But let's also give defenders a chance, especially when they're not even technically hitting them in the head. Like those penalties extended drives that allowed the Kansas City to go on and kind of build a lead. And Houston they played bad in certain areas, but they were right there. They outgained Kansas City, and C.J. Stroud had an okay game. They had their own flaws. They were going to beat themselves, but those penalties were egregious. And then shout out, we got to stick up for the old lineman, Deion Dawkins last night. That snatch technique, we are taught that. Everything about that was textbook. It was perfect, and the ref threw the flag immediately as if it was this obvious holding call. I'm like, we got to figure something out. Those plays are too important.
We need the rest to know ball. That is the solution to all of this. Thankfully, Marshall knows ball, and he spends every Monday with us. Check him out coming up, the pregame power up. Marshall and I both going to be there tonight, helping look ahead to the college football playoff national championship. 10 hours from this game. I'm too nervous to do math. Notre Dame and Ohio State are going to play a football game tonight, and the winner of this football game is going to be the national championship for the 2024-25 season, the first national champion that comes in the expanded 12-team playoff. Dad, we've seen an incredible road here for both of these teams, one that on Ohio State side was marred by a loss to their rival Michigan that we thought would undo their entire season, and for Notre Dame, a loss to Northern Illinois that should have tanked their year in week 2. Both of these teams responded in incredible fashion. Both have earned their place in this in a way that no other college football teams in the history of this game can say they have with the postseason run they've been on. And I know a lot of people have spent time waxing poetic about the viability of this postseason format, how it fits into the history of the sport here. We have two incredibly battle-tested teams that now have an opportunity to go out here and do something that's never been done before, winning this many games in this format here. And I am probably going to barf before it kicks off, despite having no impact on the outcome of the game here. So any updates on your flight right now, Dad? How are you feeling on that side? Do we have a chance of getting you here for kickoff still?
I'm holding it at 5:00, 50 minutes delayed at this point. So now I'm getting in at a little after 3 o'clock. Kickoff is at 7:30. So I'll have time to drop my stuff off at the hotel before we all hit the pregame party that we're going to. I'm fingers crossed that the flight's not delayed anymore. Time will tell. I keep refreshing my app, my Delta app, to make sure. We'll see. Hopefully I will get there. I'm looking forward to this game. I'm looking forward to listen, I love working games. You call college games. I call NFL games. I love calling. Finishing up my season with Baltimore at Buffalo last night as I sit here in a Buffalo hotel room. But it's going to be nice to just watch the game as a fan, just to enjoy the atmosphere of the friends that we'll be with. Win or lose, I'm going to be fine with it. Obviously, I want them to win. I know you're going to be tortured if Notre Dame were to lose. I am just looking forward to not having any boards in front of me, not having any notes in front of me, not having to prepare for this game by watching film, watching tape, writing down notes, and just watching this game while I have a brat in one hand and a beer in the other hand, and just enjoying hopefully some good football and a Notre Dame victory.
I am so envious of your naivete, because I'm totally the other way. I love working during Notre Dame games because I need some sort of distraction for the pain that's going to come, because as I've often said, fandom is a mistake. It's a poison that we willingly let enter our bodies that has very little upside and mostly only pain for the majority of us that don't root for a team like Alabama. By the way, Alabama fans, I don't know how you guys did this every year. My wallet is hemorrhaging money around here between gear and everything else that goes into this weekend. The fact that y'all did this every other year for like a decade truly built different, and that level of stamina is something that I aspire to going into this weekend. So while I try and get reps up there, Dad, before you get in, let's talk about the actual game itself. Notre Dame, an 8.5-point dog in this game, a talent gap that we know exists still, even with all the talent they've got in this roster. A Notre Dame team far more injured, although Ohio State's offensive line and the injuries there have been a big story of this season as well. And I'm sure a healthy portion of the nation, given Notre Dame's history, even after wins against Georgia, wins against Penn State in the Sugar Bowl and the Orange Bowl, respectively, probably still not giving the Irish much of a chance. And so as you look at this matchup, Dad, where I think really the one that people have circled is the Ohio State offense against this Notre Dame defense here. What does this game look like playing out, and what's the matchup that you are most paying attention to going into this?
Well, I mean, the matchup is the fact that Al Golden, the defensive coordinator, who, let's see, much like Detroit and their coordinators, if Notre Dame can hang on to Al Golden, who's going to be sought after for NFL defensive coordinator jobs like the Cincinnati Bengals. So let's see if we can hang on to him.
I'm watching you guys. Stay away. Yeah. Zach Taylor, grow up. This is ridiculous that I have to keep dealing with this. Sorry, go ahead. Sick of it.
Listen, Notre Dame, they turn the ball over the most in the country. They get turnovers, kind of like Buffalo did. So, can you get turnovers? But you can't count on those. You have to try and create those. So you have to count on the X's and O's. And the X's and O's say Notre Dame plays man coverage more than any team in FBS football. And Ohio State has one of the more explosive wide receivers in the game, who, oh, by the way, happens to be a true freshman at 215 pounds in Jeremiah Smith, which is just ridiculous. So how does Notre Dame go about defensing Jeremiah Smith. And by the way, he's not the only receiver on the team, but he is the big hitter on that team. So do you play the exact same amount of man? Do you mix? They'll obviously play some zone. Do you play a man? Do you have a free safety free to help over the top of Jeremiah Smith? Remember, against Texas, Jeremiah Smith only had 3 targets and 1 reception. So, but again, Notre Dame plays a ton of man. I'm sure Jeremiah Smith is licking his chops saying, go ahead and play man. I'm sure Will Howard is looking for that matchup and is going to exploit it. So do they exploit it? Can they exploit it? Can Notre Dame get a rush on Will Howard? Can they get him off his spot? Getting Riley Leonard off his spot is more, if he's off his spot, you have a chance for Riley Leonard to run and do something damaging. Now, Will Howard can move some, but not like Riley Leonard. So getting Will Howard off his spot and throwing the timing off of a play can be key. But to me, it's how you defend Jeremiah Smith.
Well, and Dad, this is what I wanted to ask you, because to your point, according to ESPN research, Notre Dame's played man on 57% of their dropbacks so far this season. For Texas and what they did in helping limit Jeremiah Smith, they 200 on 56% of those snaps and on 75% of those snaps here. And they said anyone but 4 is going to beat us in this game. And that was their strategy. So for Notre Dame, that's gone total oppo, where they've let Christian Gray and company go out there and strap guys up man to man. They put Xavier Watts deep. As a former defensive player, how much would you endorse altering what you do going into such a big game? How much would you change of your identity going into the most important game of the season after playing one way for so long?
There's being confident in how you play. And certainly when I played in Philly and played for Buddy Ryan, that's what Buddy Ryan did. No matter what, he was playing his defense and said, guys, go execute it. Bud Carson came in as a D coordinator and kind of tweaked it a little bit to help against better players. I think you have to, I'm not going to say swallow your pride. I think you have to game plan for the offense that's available, right? That you're playing. This is the best receiver Notre Dame will play against. Do you play him the exact same that you play everybody else? I'd say maybe if you start that way, but do you let him, if he potentially hurts you early, do you change it up? I would change things up a bit, try and confuse Will Howard with some zone. I would not just stick with, we played man, we're going to play man. This is, without question, the best receiver you're going to play. You have to respect that while not completely getting away from your defense. That's why a game plan is different for every game, because the talent you're playing against is different every game. This happens to be, the emphasis is on the wide receiver. You have to take that into account.
Yeah, I think you've almost got to treat him like a quality pass rusher and throw a lot of different things at him. Now, Leonard Moore on the other side for Notre Dame, their freshman cornerback, was the Pro Football Writer, or I think the College Football Writers Association Freshman Defensive Player of the Year. So he's been great all year long when Benjamin Morrison went down, stepping in and helping these guys out. But like we've seen, Notre Dame's played this Ohio State team each of the last 2 seasons, and we've seen them play man coverage against guys like Marvin Harrison Jr. They face quality receivers, although Jeremiah Smith does feel somewhat like a final boss. And it's worth noting, all 10 of Will Howard's interceptions this season have come against zone coverage. So that is also, when you're looking and scouting your opponent, something that he operates poorly against. And so I do think they're going to have to mix it in certain spots. They're going to have to keep him guessing. And from the neck up, this defense certainly has the capability of doing that against this Ohio State offense. That Donovan Jackson's a great offensive lineman. He moved out to left tackle at guard. I think it's one of the more underrated stories all year long, how well he has played and tasked with doing that. The rest of the interior, though, can struggle sometimes getting guys on edges. And I think the one thing Texas did really well is force them to try and pass off movement, get on their edges, draw penalties, and put them in long yardage situations and get them off schedule. If Ohio State can get Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins rolling downhill early, the way Penn State was able to get their rushing attack going, it's curtains for Notre Dame. You can't defend everything with this offense. And so their front 7 and really their front 6 have to be able to hold that down in light box runs and help them provide options for the back end against those receivers.
And Notre Dame, I think, needs to disguise well, right? Guys stepping to the line like they're going to blitz and then back out on the snap. do not give away the blitz. If the blitz gets picked up, that's an uh-oh moment for the defense. Now you're most likely in man coverage. If the blitz get picked up, the quarterback has extra time, and it's tough to cover for that long of a time. So I think disguising is so key. Faking like you're going to blitz and backing out. Try and confuse the quarterback. And then when you get a blitz, you got to win. You got to get Will Howard off his spot.
They do. So that's going to be the matchup on that side of the ball. And Chip Kelly is an offensive coordinator against Al Golden. Going to be a masterclass. Both of them. Chip Kelly's such a master of misdirection in that offense. Going to challenge the eyes of a Notre Dame linebacker group that might be my vote for most improved, maybe behind the offensive line over the course of a long season. They're going to be up for that challenge in a way that early in the season I would not have predicted. On the other side, Dad, Notre Dame faces arguably, and I think statistically in most categories, the best defense in college football this year, who has looked even better in this postseason run here. Jack Sawyer and JTT on that defensive line with guys in the middle that are studs as well. The back end, Caleb Downs has looked like maybe the best defensive player in the country for stretches this season. Going up against a Notre Dame offensive line that's got one player in Rocco Spindler at right guard banged up coming off their Sugar Bowl victory, didn't finish that game in the lineup. And then at left tackle, Charles Jagasaw getting just his second bit of true playing time behind that Orange Bowl victory. His first start of the season at left tackle. He was projected to be the starter going into the season, tears his pec in training camp. That gives way to Anthony Knapp, who goes on to a freshman All-American season at left tackle for them there. And so now, Dad, Charles Jagasaw getting his first extended look at this pair of edge rushers, including Jack Sawyer, the hero coming off the Cotton Bowl, who now etched his name into Ohio State history. What does Mike Denbrock and the Notre Dame offense need to do to try and give themselves a chance against this Ohio State defense?
Oh, this is Riley Leonard's last game at Notre Dame, last game in college. Use him. Roll him out to pass or option to run the quarterback powers. I mean, this guy is very talented in the way he gains yards. And Notre Dame needs to have a running game. And Ohio State is great at stopping the running game because I've said this for the last couple of playoff games. Notre Dame has not been in a position where they've had to exclusively pass their way back into a game. And they have to be tested on that. That's what Ohio State will try and do. And that means getting up a couple of scores and having Notre Dame have to abandon the run and just throw the ball. I don't know how good of a passing attack they can be with just a passing attack without the running game mixed in because they haven't been tested on it. So if it gets down to that, Notre Dame could very well be in trouble. Notre Dame just has to keep hammering away at the run, because that gives to the play action. That gives to the play action in the half boot or the quarterback rollout, and it can keep all Mike Denbrock's options open.
I think if Mike Denbrock calls the game the way he did in the second half at Penn State, Notre Dame's got a much better chance because you're going to have to move the pocket early, and I think you're going to have to pass early, Dad. They've come out in a couple of these playoff games firing early, and you're coming off of Jaden Greathouse's best game of the season so far. We know what a guy like Jordan Faison has meant for them, the two-way lacrosse star, and so the one place you look at in this Ohio State defense where you say maybe there's an opportunity, I think is on the outside at cornerback. Middle of the field is going to be tough, and you're going to have to see Mitchell Evans maybe get loose there eventually. But I think if you can loosen that up a little bit, Jeremiah Love probably going to be as healthy as he's been in this run, physically, illness-wise, all that stuff. And Riley Leonard's legs getting involved early to try and offset this line because Rocco Spindler being banged up against Tyleik Williams and those guys in the interior isn't any more of an easy matchup than on the exterior ones we've talked about.
It is very true, sitting there saying they should run the ball, but starting the game passing the ball, trying to back those linebackers up a little bit, not let them just run downhill to Notre Dame's running attack is a smart move by Mike Denbrock. You always want to get the defense guessing, and if Notre Dame can pass the ball early and do that, they could find an early advantage.
postseason we've seen by a division in quite some time. The NFC North, given the weight of what they accomplished during the regular season and what their top three teams went out and put up in the postseason in terms of a performance, is going to take some interesting studying to go forward and make sure we avoid the NBA's fate of a regular season starting to feel somewhat meaningless as the Kansas City Chiefs continue their march towards oblivion. Dad, we just both predicted Notre Dame to win tonight in the national championship. A lot of conversation been had this week. I just wanted to ask you something as we put a bow on that and transition back to the NFL. Do you care if Notre Dame is liked? Because I feel like there's been such a story on both sides for Notre Dame and Ohio State in this postseason run about likability for these two programs that are meeting again. It meant regular seasons. Ohio State certainly had more postseason success as of late than Notre Dame has, especially in the national championship column here. But a lot been written about that. Is that something that you, as a lifelong member of the Notre Dame fraternity, actually care about?
No, I don't care one damn bit about being liked, because the reasons for not being liked are somewhat laughable, but everybody's allowed their opinion. Everybody's allowed to dislike Notre Dame. I think they're more likable because of Marcus Freeman? Yes, I do. He's a very likable guy. He's a great recruiter. Players love him. Parents love him. Hey, let's throw it out there. He's a good-looking dude. I mean, he's got the whole package going right now. And in his third year, he has his team playing in the national championship. So I do think they're more likable, but do I care about that? Not one bit.
I have sort of gotten sick of it as a talking point because it really isn't something that matters, and it never has. I'm fine. I was talking to our friend Jessica Smetana yesterday. I would rather be so good, as she put it, that people hated us for that. And so hopefully that can be the case there. And I think for Ohio State, that's certainly built into a lot of people's feelings about them, is they have been one of the haves in terms of talent, in terms of accomplishment in the 21st century. All those things have been a part of it. So again, likability usually travels as far as how big of a threat are you to my team. I always go back to LeBron James and the way he talked about Steph Curry in previous iterations. And then once Golden State fully came online as the war machine and started threatening LeBron's crown, it was amazing how different that got for a while. And I think a similar thing happens in college football. I just thought that was interesting because we talked finally about the game in the lead up to this one, but I felt like so much of the week's coverage has been about likability politics around these two teams, as if that's going to do a damn bit of anything come game time. As we saw for the Detroit Lions, it only matters so much how much everyone is rooting for you until ultimately you have to go out there. And that's the thing that scares me as we look at the NFC North, is I have seen a lot of Notre Dame in terms of both the scorned nature of the fandom and the mounting injuries that took down that team. But Dad, as we do the postmortem on the NFC North, the Detroit Lions are the 1 seed, sent back home packing by the Washington Commanders. The Green Bay Packers, another team that had performed incredibly well. The Minnesota Vikings, a team that won 14 games, upended by the Los Angeles Rams here. What do we take away from this idea, Dad, that these incredible regular season runs went up so quickly in smoke in the postseason? And does it threaten any of the viability of the NFL's regular season if those things don't matter in the way that they did here?
I mean, it just goes to show you that the playoffs are a different level, that there's more pressure when there's not another week to go to, that you're one and done, that your plan is to go on in the playoffs, but you could just as easily the next day be packing up your locker. I mean, for Detroit, think of those players. I mean, they had visions of Super Bowl in their head, as all teams do in the playoffs, but Detroit, I mean, understandably so. I mean, they're packing up their lockers. I mean, the season's over. Now, Green Bay's loss to Philly is not surprising, right? Philly was favored in that game, so I wasn't really surprised at that. The Minnesota loss, and I called that game in Detroit. Minnesota lost to Detroit the last week of the season, but Detroit had kind of had Minnesota's number. But Minnesota had basically taken out everybody else. So that was a little surprising, and I think they go into the offseason with the biggest question, because it's a question of quarterback. Sam Darnold, we talked about, made a boatload of money and probably still will get paid. But when push came to shove against a team in their division, Detroit, he struggled. And then, now, listen, he was sacked 9 times. It certainly was not all on him against the Rams. But that Sam Darnold of the season all of a sudden was a little bit muddied at the end of the year. You have J.J. McCarthy coming back from a knee injury. You have Sam Darnold as a free agent. So that's a little more convoluted where, the Detroit quarterback situation is square, though they may be replacing 2 new coordinators, and Green Bay basically will come back somewhat intact.
I was going to ask, are we past Jared Goff criticism in terms of maybe any sort of issues in this offense just because of the game he came off there? Again, a quarterback who's always been great, but certainly that Super Bowl ceiling, that postseason accomplishment is part of the reason he was ousted with the Rams. And I thought, Dad, the most interesting part of what we saw with Sam Darnold was some of the frustration that Kevin O'Connell even wore after that game, a guy who had been as supportive of Sam as anyone during the course of the season and is lauded for the way he deals with players, showing a similar frustration to what Sean McVay, I think, in the past showed with Jared Goff before they showed him the door. And now all of the story about Jared Goff as this reclamation project in Detroit, finding his home and maybe even a fiercer identity under Dan Campbell there. Does the performance that we got yesterday out of him undermine any of that for you and give you any fear in a post-Ben Johnson world going forward?
Well, the thing about it is, it doesn't matter if I have fear or not. He's going to be the quarterback, right? Because what are they going to do? Their backup was a guy who just coached in a high school championship game in Teddy Bridgewater over Hendon Hooker, who obviously is not ready by Detroit standards to be the backup. They have nowhere else to go. Are they going to pick up a free agent, and do better than Jared Goff? Jared Goff's their quarterback. So it doesn't matter what any of us think about how far it can take him. He's going to be the quarterback of Detroit. We're not sure which way Minnesota will go. Do they lose Sam Darnold to another team? Does he try and run it back and truly be a bridge for J.J. McCarthy, who's coming back from a knee injury? And Jordan Love is set in Green Bay. But for Detroit, again, it doesn't matter. Jared Goff is your quarterback.
Yeah, I would agree financially and otherwise, but it will be interesting to see. Jared Goff has been a quarterback kind of the Liam Neeson style with a very particular set of skills. Can throw through a keyhole over the middle on play action as well as anybody out there, but some of the off-platform stuff and last night, some of the mistakes that he was baited into make this an interesting proposition in a post-Ben Johnson world where you saw yesterday some of the play calling there, some of the play design, some of the best in the NFL that's likely walking out of the door. And so it just, Dad, I think makes this division really interesting going into next year because for Minnesota, I'm with you. Sam Darnold may still get some money from someone because the quarterback market is so depleted this season,
right?
But it's not going to be a payday from the Minnesota Vikings. I think the one thing that became very clear after that playoff game was if Sam Darnold comes back, it's going to be on a deal that makes sense for Minnesota and prioritizes J.J. McCarthy's future over extending some window that we thought might have existed with Sam Darnold after the last 2 games.
So do you think Sam Darnold, because remember, J.J. McCarthy's on a rookie deal, do you think Sam Darnold could pull off a Baker Mayfield deal? 3 years for 150 guaranteed. Not a big cap number compared to the other top quarterbacks. That way you keep them, you give them some money. Your rookie quarterback is still on a rookie pay scale, so you're not really hurt. You're below really what the better teams with the better quarterbacks have as far as a cap number on their quarterback.
I think all of that depends on your assessment of J.J. McCarthy's health this offseason and where he's at in the road to recovery from his injury. If you think, hey, there's a chance that we might not get a real offseason with him at all, and then his viability going into next year, could it all be in jeopardy? Maybe you do that. I think it could land, Dad, maybe even a little bit south of that if you are Minnesota, just because the other side of that coin is, hey, you've got one of the best play callers in the sport. You've got all these weapons. You were excited about J.J. going this season. Wouldn't you rather start reaping the benefits of that rookie deal, especially if now you have punctured and let some of the air out of that Sam Darnold confidence balloon? I think you're going to err more on the side of that. Again, provided that internally you are comfortable with where he is coming back from injury and that the things you saw going into this season where they flirted with the idea of him potentially moving closer to being the starter are still true about J.J. McCarthy now that the calendar's turned to 2025. Coming up next, we turn to this, that, and a third to finish off the show with an important fashion question coming off the divisional round. three quick stories to send us in to the national championship and me off into a day full of stress, full of wondering, and deciding my fate, whether or not you were going to see me as a broken man tomorrow and likely for the rest of the year after a game that I have attached way too much of my identity to. Dad, you can continue to smile and shake their head, but this is the man that you at least in part helped raise, and so you have to bear some of the responsibility for the brainworms that have ruined my life.
Well, I mean, it doesn't affect me, and I raise you. How does it affect you so much? I shouldn't say I've never seen somebody so into it. I just saw a stadium full of them with Buffalo Bill fans. Again, fan is short for fanatic, which you fit when it comes to Notre Dame. I just wish you could enjoy it. Listen, if Notre Dame wins, I'll be ecstatic. If Notre Dame loses, I'll be bummed. They deserve to be there. They played for the national championship. But then my life will go on. Everybody's life will go on. You just take it so damn hard.
I have not yet, been married. I don't have kids. If Notre Dame wins the national championship tonight, I don't think it would be hyperbole to say that up until this point, now into my 35th year on earth, that it would be the best day of my life. I truly think that it would have claim for that moment at this time in my life.
Better than your two nieces and nephew being born?
I mean, listen, they rock. None of them have scored a touchdown like Jeremiah Love did against Penn State in that game. I have seen neither of them lunge toward the goal line, working on a bad knee with all that season-long grind on there. So I'm just saying, I love all of them, but go get your touches up right now, because at this point, my firstborn would not be named after any of them. It's Jeremiah Watts Golic going up in here based on the season that we've had. And so that's what's at stake tonight. My happiness, my future offspring, and potentially the best day of my life here. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, and review the show. Leave it a 5-star rating. Thank you so much to everyone who's tuned in. Thank you to our guest, Marshall Newhouse, for stopping by to talk about the divisional round weekend that was. If you missed any of that, check it out wherever you get our podcast or right here on YouTube as soon as we get done with the show. Dad, let's start off with this, that, and the third with this here. Draymond Green, apparently able to say I'm sorry, which surprised a lot of people here. We saw, quote, Mark J. Spears was talking to Jordan Poole about his time with the Golden State Warriors here now. The Wizards guard said, quote, I love those guys over there, ... I love most of the guys over there. And Draymond Green went to Twitter and responded, I really am sorry here. Dad, are you amazed that this beef continues to reign this long after the initial incident, the face punch seen around the world, thanks to some leaked footage?
Seems basketball players have memories like elephants. We always talk about baseball players, like there would be something that happened on a field, and years later a pitcher would throw it a hitter, and we'd be like, what the hell was that for? And it was like, that was for 4 years ago when whatever happened. Guess athletes have long memories, right? And things stay in their craw. And I would, like most things, just kind of let it go. But boy, oh boy, it seems like athletes definitely hold a grudge.
Can you let go getting punched in the face when everyone sees it on camera after the fact, though? I feel like this might be an appropriate grudge to hold.
That is different when everything is on tape, on video, and will be there forever. That does make it different, because that can be brought up. When I talk about these baseball things, I'm talking about years ago where you don't even remember, there's no video of what happened, yet somebody's throwing at somebody. But you're right. In this day and age, you literally can't forget about what happened, because it's right in front of you, can always be brought back to light.
Draymond Green, serial instigator. That's the moment that got out to us of his relationship with Jordan Poole. Lord knows what else may have gone on behind the scenes and continue to go with this there. Dad, speaking of things that are right out on State Street, though, let's get to that. We already mentioned it a little bit, but a bold fashion choice made by a guy playing in your game, defensive tackle for the Buffalo Bills, Jordan Phillips, trotted out to pregame warmups and said, I'm not about this tough guy stuff, and went and put the full-blown jacket under his jersey on the field. Dad, did you ever play with anyone that busted out parka in pregame warmups?
No, I'm not going to lie, did not. But you know what? I appreciate it. As I said in the beginning of the show, in being on the field last night, and it was cold. Wind chill was in single digits or just maybe the low teens. when there's a cold weather team, they don't come out in pregame with no shirt on or no sleeves on. In fact, as you saw, Jordan Phillips came out with a park on. They're not trying to act tough. They already are. Okay, it's the warm weather teams that come up and take their shirts off in pregame and try and show you how tough they are, which means it's in their head, the cold. And last night, you know how they bring back former players to kind of get the crowd going? Well, last night it was Ryan Fitzpatrick. And Ryan Fitzpatrick was standing in the end zone and he ripped his shirt off and went bare chest. Which, because, as I just said, we live in a day and age of video and it doesn't go away, he's going to regret taking that shirt off and showing the body that he had. But he, again, took his shirt off and was bare-chested like some of the fans were, as a player, I doubt he ever did that. And like I said, cold weather players aren't playing that I need to show you how tough I am game.
Fitz is built different, though. I saw on the NFL on Prime desk, they put him and Richard Sherman inside a cold tub on the side of one of those cold stadium chairs and had them go toe-to-toe in there. And Richard Sherman tapped out well before Fitz was worried about any of that. So he wants the smoke. He's also got a good coating of body hair to help insulate him. He's built for the elements in a way that very few are. Yeah. Good beard.
Good
I mean, he's got
beard.
the chest hair. He's got everything else. And so... yeah, he's well insulated. So a human jacket of sorts there, which, Dad, may have been useful for this guy in the third, as we talk about a passenger holding on for dear life on the side of a high-speed bullet train. So 40-year-old Hungarian commuter was taking and riding the intercity express train going cross-country from Munich to Lübeck. When he decided to go for a smoke break outside one station, he waited too long, and so as the train was pulling away and the doors threatened to close at the stop there, he decided to jump between the bracket between two cars like he's Jason freaking Statham. And so the train, speeding away at 175 miles per hour, made it 20 miles while he was gripping and holding on for dear life before other passengers were able to alert the people driving this train that someone was out there caught in between the cars. Dad, I don't know if missing any train is ever worth having to hold on like that, like I'm in some sort of Daredevil movie.
Well, yeah, I mean, 175 miles an hour, too, for 20 miles. And he was taken off by the police. And basically, when asked why he did it, he said, because I left my luggage on the train. I didn't want to not have my luggage, so I jumped on the train. And he said they'll likely be charged with disrupting operations and also being probed for financial impropriety because he didn't possess a valid ticket. In light of the ludicrous situation, authorities have implored authorities have implored the public to refrain from engaging in life-threatening nonsense. But yeah, dude said he jumped back on the train. He said he jumped back on the train because he didn't want to lose his luggage, which he left on the train while he was taking a smoke break.
All right, first of all, if you don't die doing what this guy did, I feel like we got to rip up the ticket just on principle. Sort of like the rule of cool in football, where if something's so sick it should count. Rule of cool, and in this case, maybe rule of fool, this guy should have that ticket absolved. But, Dad, much like my thought process on there are very few things in transit when I'm in the airport that are worth waiting in line for, there are also very few things I travel with that are worth holding on to a 175-mile-an-hour moving train to try and go back and get. I feel like there's got to be a better process. There's got to be a better way, and this guy's got to be a better adult rather than putting himself in this situation. I can't think of a thing I've traveled with that would have me jumping back on a train to go get it.
All right, we're all done with that. How nervous are you right this moment?
Right this second, I'm okay because I'm in a hotel room insulated from everything else. But I walked down in the lobby to go get coffee, and I got my first Go Irish of the morning from someone walking up in Notre Dame gear towards the same Starbucks I was at. And that was the moment where it started to get real for me. So as the day goes along, much like it got real when I saw that hype video of the man going